Good morning YouTube and welcome back to the channel. In today's video we will be servicing my trusty 2006 GSXR 600 K6 and we'll also go over everything that you need to do, well I do, with when I bring the bikes out of winter storage. So stay tuned, hope you enjoy the video, and like I say, this has all got to be done because we will be going to the Nürburgring on the bikes very soon. So as mentioned, I'll be going through the service today. Now the first thing that you're going to need to collect is the actual parts. Now you can buy this kit directly from Suzuki. It comes with everything we're going to need today in terms of oil filter, spark plugs, nice little package directly from them. I've also picked up some blue antifreeze coolant, Silcoline oil, ATE brake fluid, brake cleaner just for cleaning any mess, and some chain oil as well. Now another thing to note, if you have got one still, is the owner's manual is actually pretty good with tips throughout for servicing the bike. It even goes through from memory from bits like plug torque settings. Really good to have to hand if you've got it. And finally, a cup of tea. So the first job was actually giving the bike a good clean. Now I am going to give it a polish as well once I've finished all the service, but where the bike has been left in the garage and I've got an old asbestos roof, it does get very dusty in here. So first thing, like I say, get everything cleaned, and then once that's done we can then start stripping the bike down. And because of the dust on it, I did use a snow foam, which is brilliant just to loosen any of the stuff that's been on there over the winter. And like I say, even for the paintwork now, being a 2006 bike, it does still look really good. First job is removing the seat. Now there are literally 2 bolts that hold it on at the front. Once you've removed both sides, you can then just lift it up and you're greeted by the battery. Now through winter I have mine disconnected and I leave it on a balance charger, but like I say, for now I'll put it back in just to check it fired, and obviously in true Japanese bike style, on the button. So with the bike at working height on the ramp, it's now time to undo the side fairings, which are just these Allen key bolts here. There's one down there, and then there's one in the front that joins it all. And so once you've done those off, you can remove all the lower bodywork to gain access to everything we're going to need to for the service. So starting with the left side with the Allen key bolts undone and the lower one in the middle, you now need to undo the clips in here for the V-piece trim, and then it should all just pop out. So with the side fairing removed, you can now see my relocated regulator, which I actually discussed in the review video because it moves it from the back of the radiator just into cool airflow. Now as you can see, it's a little bit dusty in places, obviously where the fairing covers it, and now with the bodywork removed you can see the rubber bungs that were holding the fairing on, because when you do try to pull it off it feels like it's still bolted, but essentially as you can see, these are the tabs that hold it, the bottom one and the one down there. But other than that, these are literally just pull off. Like I say, don't try and bend it at an angle, just pull it towards you and they will pop out of the brackets. So now it's just on to doing the other side. So with both side fairings removed, we now can see the full coolant system, which obviously we're going to be draining and flushing. If you come back round to the other side, in between the lovely Aquapovic exhaust manifold, you can see the oil filter, and then just down here on the bottom, the drain plug. So I've had the bike up to temperature about half an hour ago, so it's nice and warm. Going to undo that and let all the oil drain out while we're doing the other jobs. So with the oil draining, as you can see, still pretty clear. Hopefully the camera will zoom in there from when I last serviced the bike. There we go. Still looks really good order, which is nice, and I can see that when I look through the oil filler cap. Next thing is have a look at your sump plug. Now on the top of the sump plug there is a magnetic washer. Good news, no swarf burrs, which means nothing's broken up inside the engine and been pulled onto the magnet. So now just onto the oil filter. So this is where the brake and clutch cleaner comes in handy. Because the oil filter is dripped all over the exhaust, I will blast all that off afterwards, because if you don't, you're just going to get loads of smoke when you fire it up. So like I say, we're going to leave that now just to drain, and then once it's stopped, we'll put the new oil filter on, clean all this off the manifold. I mean, you could put a sheet of card or something there that's gonna stop all the oil sticking to the manifold, but I find it easy enough simply just to clean it all after I'm done. And then like I say, you get a couple of seconds of smoke off the manifold and that should be the end of it. So now we'll move on to the rest of the service while that's draining away. So we'll now move on to the air filter and spark plug change, which is under the fuel tank. Now if you remove the rear seat, just under the side pod here, you should have this little bar which enables you to hold the fuel tank, and essentially it will sit like that once the tank's up. But the first job we got to do is remove these side trims, which are held on by Velcro, and a lock-in tab, which I'll video now being removed, and then we can move on to lifting the tank. With the fuel tank prop in place, as you can see, it now gives you plenty of access to work on the airbox and remove the airbox. The only pipe that you need to disconnect is this vacuum line from here. And then like I say, you can leave all the fuel line in place, gives you plenty of room under there, and you can obviously work safely on the bike because this will stop the tank from falling down during the work. So with the relays simply slidden off from the airbox lid, I believe that to be the air inlet temperature sensor unplugged and the vacuum pipe off the back of the airbox, you can now remove the airbox lid, which is simply these crosshead screws that run around the outside. Now there's 11 in total and there's one right in the center as well. And once they're undone, the lid should simply move off. So with the airbox lid removed, you can now see the lovely throttle bodies and trumpets. And essentially that's your filter there. It's got a sign on it that says up for the direction, and it should just lift out. Now, let's have a look. To be honest with you, shows the minimal mileage I cover. That still looks pretty brand new, but we'll replace it because we're here anyway, and it's in the service kit included. But you can then see the air intakes that are fed there from the side that go through the grills on the bike. So a nice ram air effect, as you obviously hear used a lot with motorcycle airboxes. But yeah, we'll put the new filter in, but we're also going to take the airbox out as well to do the spark plugs. So moving on to removing the airbox to gain access to the spark plugs. Now you need to remove the stock airbox, and I'll try and get a torch in here, and just in front of the injector plug there you can see a small Allen key. There's actually 4 of those on each throttle body. We need to remove those, which is really fiddly from memory when I did it a couple of years ago. And then remove the 13mm from the front of the airbox. And there's a vacuum pipe or a drain pipe, or I think it's for the pair valve, which is just on this side, which I've already slid the clip down, so that's ready to slide off. So top tip for the corner ones, they're actually these plugs that go into the side of the frame. Now you can pop these out, and once you've done that, your Allen key can then grab the corner one, otherwise you'll be there for ages fighting it. Why they don't mention that in the manual, I'm not sure, but it makes life so much easier. And then once you're done, just push that plug back in. With the airbox removed, you can now see the full throttle body assembly and the spark plug coils, which we're going to disconnect and lift. Now, I did have a collision with a pigeon last year, or even the year before now, I think, which went into the radiator, and as you can see, still some of it in there. So we'll clear that out, remove the 4 coils now, and then take the spark plugs out. So the coils can be quite stiff to remove. These rubber boots end up getting bonded to the cylinder head material. So they just need a little wiggle and they will eventually pull out. Now I lay all my coils out in the direction or assembly that they were removed from the bike, which will do the same with the spark plug. So if here you're seeing any oil around these, you've probably got a rocker cover leak. If you're seeing them really rusty, there's probably an issue with the seal that's letting water past. All problems that can cause running issues. But like I say, all mine are nice and dry and clean, and we'll now remove the plugs. So now on to removing the spark plug. So I've got a small socket here. It does come with a nice kit that will do this job quite easily because it is a fiddly gap in there. But hopefully, as you'll be able to see in this video, it is doable with basic tools. So with all 4 plugs removed, I'm pleased to report everything looks great. Nice cocoa brown colour on there. If it was white and ashy, it'd be indicating it's running lean. If it was petrolly and oily, it'd be running rich. If it was just oily, you've got a problem with the rings. So like I say, it's always nice to see them all coming out in good order. Now the bike ran absolutely fine before stripping down, but always reassuring. So we'll get the new plugs out the kit now and get those fitted. So to refit the spark plugs is the same as the removal. You ideally need a torque wrench that's capable of doing 12 Newton meters or 8 foot-pounds for the new plugs. So to help the coils go in nice and easily and the boot sit correctly, I just use a little bit of red grease just on the seals before pushing them back into the cylinder head. With the fuel tank back down, you just need to do up the 6mm Allen key and make sure you remember to do the breather that goes on the tank as you lower it down. And now you can jack the bike back up and begin work on finishing the oil service. So with the new crush washer on the sump plug and torqued to 21 Newton meters, oil filter in place, you can either now fire it up and let all the residue burn off the exhaust, or providing the exhaust is cold, hit everything with some brake cleaner and clutch cleaner. And this stuff, once it's fully dried, will just evaporate. As hopefully can be seen there. So now on to fill in with the engine oil. I run the Coolant Pro 4 in my bikes. Always used the stuff for years, always heard good reviews. Obviously everyone always have an opinion on what they use, but ideally 10W40 is the weight you require, and you're going to need to put 2.5 litres through the fill plug and then obviously fire it up and see how the level looks. So with 2.5 litres or 2,500 millilitres now in the bike, you can secure the filler cap, and you can see there it says 2,200 on the side. Now that's for if you don't change the oil filter. But as you can see, the sight glass is bang on level. Now it may drop slightly as the oil filter fills up around the front there. So what we're going to do now is just fire the bike up, leave it running for about 30 seconds. What you do want to be careful of is when you fire it up that you make sure the engine oil pressure light clears in a couple of seconds. If not, you've either not got enough oil in there, or a potential flow issue, or a problem with the oil filter. So with the engine left running for a couple of minutes, I then switch it back off and you have to wait 3 minutes. Now, as you can see, the sight glass appears that there is no oil in there, which is not the case. We're just off of the sight glass. And this is how Suzuki's owner's manual suggests to do it as well, is we now need to top it up. And it's probably, I would imagine, somewhere around here. So we're not going to need a lot of oil. I'm going to start with 150 millilitres, back again through the filling cap, and see where the level sits after that, and keep topping up accordingly. You can now see we are sat perfectly in the middle, or slightly above the middle, on the sight glass. Oil filter's primed, and that, ladies and gentlemen, is the oil service complete. So on to the cooling system now on the left hand side of the bike. I believe this to be some sort of water bleed point, but you can also drain from it as well. There doesn't appear to be any drains or bleeds on the cylinder head, other than removing the coolant lines, which we'll do later on. So starting from this side, the first thing you need to do is undo the expansion cap, which, if it hasn't been done for a while like mine, it might be pretty tight. And as you can see, coolant in there, the reservoir as well, which we'll have to drain. And like I say, we'll undo that now, and hopefully we can control the speed of the coolant coming out with the bleed screw just resting it slowly out of there and into my co-op water bottle. With the lower hose disconnected, the last of the coolant can then be drained out the bike. Now at this point, if you're using the same colour, you can simply put it all back together and top it up. But what I do is I run it through with some clear water, make sure all the old stuff's out the system. You can use distilled water ideally, but if you haven't got it, providing you're draining the system, normal water will be fine because you'll be filling it up with coolant anyway. So I'm going to do that now, flush it, because I'm going to be moving to blue coolant, which I believe is the factory original. And then we'll be putting it all back together and bleeding the system up. So next you need to clean out the reservoir stroke expansion tank. As you can see, there's lots of green coolant in there, so we don't want that mixing with the blue because there is a risk that it could all congeal. So we'll wash that out now, top it back up with the blue, and then begin filling the cooling system. So with the expansion tank cleaned, just make sure that you clean all in here because they can get a bit crystallized, and the same with the cap. I've given that a good wipe over to make sure it seals nicely. Make sure all the lines are connected, all the drains are back in, and then you can fill this up to the midway point, which on the inside, it's difficult to see now, is where the, see it there, where the minimum and maximum level are, and then we'll start topping the radiator up once we've done the coolant line and the bleed screw back up. So new copper washer to go on the coolant bleed screw, and then we'll just do that lower hose up and we can begin filling the coolant system. So with the reservoir filled to the midway line, and the system appearing to be full, you can see that the blue coolant is at the top of the radiator. Now, we've definitely got an airlock down the bottom. I've given all the hoses a quick squeeze just to try and work out any bubbles. You can hear it splashing away. But what you actually need to do is momentarily undo this. A flush of air will come out and then coolant will start flowing. And as soon as the coolant starts flowing, you put the screw back in. Just be careful not to cross thread it in the panic of trying to stop coolant going everywhere. And then once that's done, it's just a case of running it up to temperature. So with the bike run up to 105 degrees, you check that the cooling fan kicks in, which it does. Switch everything back off, and then you need to leave it a few hours to make sure everything's cooled right back down. And then you can just open the expansion tank cap and check the fluid level. Now, again, I must stress, do not open it when it's hot. Just wait for the bike, ideally the following morning. And if you need to top it up, add a little bit of coolant. Otherwise, that's the coolant change complete. You can now simply put all the bodywork back on that we've removed, the seat, the rear pillion seat cover or pillion seat if you run it, and then we'll move on to the final part, which is the brake fluid change. So on the rear caliper of the GSXR, the reservoir is actually hidden behind the rear subframe, which you can see in there, so there's no way of topping up. What you need to do is undo this 8mm nut, bring the reservoir around, and then you can start taking the cap off and servicing the rear brake. So with the reservoir now round, you can obviously gain access to the two crosshead screws on the top. Now in mine, I did run a brake fluid called ATE Racing Blue, which has now been discontinued, and we'll be putting the replacement, which is ATE 200 in there. So like I say, undo the caps, and then we can start bleeding the system. So I've used a cable tie just to hold the reservoir in place while I'm doing the brake service. I've got an easy bleed kit, which we're not plugged up to the air compressor. We're just going to do it manual the old school way, but just use it as a drain tub. And essentially all you do is you pump the pedal down, hold it, crack the nipple off, all the fluid will come up, do the nipple back off, then let off the pedal and it will pull the fluid through. It's a bit slower, but on a bike system there's not a lot of fluid, so we'll start work on that now. So with the fluid all bled, all back together, I'm on the midway mark now, and it's just a case of checking that the wheel rotates freely and backs off correctly. So with the chain dry waxed, the only thing left to do is check the tension now. It's pretty straightforward. I'd like to think that most of you watching this know how to adjust your own chain, but you do have the markings there to keep it all equal if you do need to dial the tension in a little bit. Now looking at mine, I've still got a good amount. They reckon 25 to 30 mil. So given the minimal mileage, there's nothing I'm going to need to do to the chain other than the oil and clean this year. Final thing, and one I've seen this so many times, something you should check before every ride, especially like myself if you use it every couple of weeks, is tyre pressures. Now it's all detailed here on the chain guard if it hasn't been removed. Now for a standard solo rider like myself, 36 psi all round cold, and the amount of times I've checked tyre pressures after leaving a bike for a few months and they drop 5 or 6 psi, and you get on the bikes and you think, what on earth is wrong with this? And you ask the owner and they say, oh yeah, I haven't checked that, mate. It's such a simple thing and it makes such a big difference. So it's always something I do, especially like say if I haven't used the bike for a couple of weeks, just make sure all the tyres are to correct pressure. And that is, like I say, cold pressure on the wonderful Pirelli Rosso Corsa 2s I've got fitted. So a prime example, I'll try and do this one-handed. As I say, the bike hasn't been out for about 6 months. So let's have a look. There we go, 29 psi, so 7 psi down on what it should be. Certainly worth pumping up and definitely checking if you're like me where you only use it throughout the summer months. So hopefully you guys found the review helpful. I must stress that I'm not a Suzuki technician, not Suzuki trained. It's just stuff I've picked up over the years. So as per the intro, following the guide is at your own risk, but if you enjoyed it, make sure you like, subscribe, give us a thumbs up, and if you haven't already seen it, check out the GSXR 600 K6 road review. Until next time, thanks for watching.